everyone, it's Jack from Cultaholic.com, and it's time to talk about Monday Night Raw, the opposite of the go-home show. What's the opposite of a go-home show? A popping out show. It's time to talk about the popping out show in the aftermath of Sunday's Clash of Champions. But how good was this week's Raw? As you know, there's only one way to find out, and that's by assigning each individual segment a lovely individual grade. That's right, it's time to talk about Monday Night Raw Graded. We start the show with the man who is still the Universal Champion, Seth bloody Rollins. Burn it down. Seth gets in the ring and basically does one of my What Happened At videos, where he just recaps what happened at Clash of Champions, or at least what happened in his matches at Clash of Champions. He says, oh, me and Braun lost the tag team titles in the first match of the show, but then in the main event I was able to defeat Braun Strowman, but let me tell you, he took me to my very limit. I've made a note here actually. Seth actually says the line, mad props to Braun Strowman, because Seth's down with the kids, he knows the cool lingo and all that. Seth then explains how he beat Strowman. He says, oh, I hit him with one stomp, it wasn't enough. I hit him with two stomps, it wasn't enough. I hit him with three stomps, it wasn't enough. I had to dig deep into my book of trips. I'm sure he meant to say tricks, but he says trips, which is ironic because he's talking about hitting the pedigree. Maybe it was one of those deliberate little jokes that wrestlers throw in to pop the boys backstage, haha. Seth then goes on to talk about the aftermath of that match, which of course was when the Fiend Bray Wyatt attacked him. Seth says, predictably, when I regained consciousness, Bray was nowhere to be found, implying that Bray is a coward who only ambushes people. Seth is cut off by the Firefly Funhouse music, and we're about to get a little bit of interaction between the two. Bray appears on the Titantron and says he's really glad to see that Seth's okay. Seth is obviously like, what are you talking about? You're weird, man, you need some help. But he's cut off by Rambling Rabbit, who warns him to run. Bray is like, shut up, don't tell him that. Bray then says, I hope we can be friends, and of course, friends forgive each other, but not the Fiend. The Fiend never forgets. For this opening segment, I'm going to give it a B+ grade. I thought Seth's whole recap bit was a little bit predictable and basically a cookie cutter post pay-per-view opening segment of Monday Night Raw, but it quickly became far more exciting when Bray Wyatt involved himself by appearing on the Titantron and everything, and Seth, to his credit as well, really reacted well in the ring to what Wyatt was saying and just to how weird and unnerving his character is. I'm really looking forward to that match come Hell in a Cell. Next up, we get another promo segment, a tag team summit featuring all of the new champions. I think I'm right in saying that the only belts that actually changed hands at Clash of Champions were both sets of the men's tag team titles. So all the new champions come out to the ring. On the Raw side, we've got Robert Roode, and Dolph Ziggler. And on the SmackDown side, we've got Dash and Dawson, the Revival. Roode takes the microphone and he's barely said a few sentences before Braun Strowman's music hits, and obviously he's in a very bad mood, having just lost the night before. He charges down the ramp, the Revival try and stop him, but he deals with them pretty quickly, gets in the ring, Ziggler charges at him, he eats a big boot, Roode bails, just runs away, which is probably the smartest thing to do. He's probably the cleverest out of the four men. Strowman then runs around the ring and just starts knocking people out of the way, but he just completely misses Dawson. Dash takes the bump properly. He then misses Roode, but that was deliberate. Roode gets back in the ring and runs away, and he nails Ziggler with a big floppy bump like Ziggler does. And that's pretty much it. That's the segment. A little bit earlier on, just before the segment, around the commercial break, Strowman had warned everyone backstage that the next people to get in the ring were going to get these hands, and that's exactly what happened. On one hand, I like this segment for keeping Braun strong and relevant in the aftermath of his defeat to Rollins. So many times we've seen Strowman come so close to winning the Universal title and then just be forgotten about or shoved further down the card in the immediate aftermath. Instead, he was kept strong and relevant, but on the other hand, I didn't like it because he was beating up 4 new champions in the company, if that makes sense. So it kind of balances out for me. I'm going to go straight down the middle and give it a C grade. Next up, 6-man tag team action pitting the OC, Styles, Gallows and Anderson, against the team of Cedric Alexander and both of the Viking Raiders. This is a decent but sort of unspectacular match, not helped by the fact that the crowd didn't seem too into it, especially given the fact that all the guys in the ring are really good wrestlers. I guess maybe it lacked a bit of star power, with Styles being the only really major star in there, but it was still a decent match, I suppose. The finish was really good, with Styles hitting an excellent phenomenal forearm, which Cedric sold like death, but again, it was Cedric eating a clean pinfall to AJ Styles. In fact, Styles wasn't done. He just continued to beat up Cedric after the bell. The Viking Raiders got in the ring, but they were distracted by the OC. They started a big brawl, and eventually it was Ivar, I think, who leapt off the top rope onto the outside, taking out both his own tag team partner and Gallows and Anderson, leaving Styles and Cedric alone in the ring, where obviously Cedric finally made sure that Styles got his comeuppance. No, that's not what happened. Styles got the better of the exchange yet again, hitting him with a Styles Clash from the second rope. When's Cedric going to catch a break? This gets a C+, alright? I was going to give it a B-, maybe even a B, but what's going on with the booking of Cedric? He lost in very straightforward fashion on the kickoff show at Clash of Champions and was then beaten down afterwards by all three members of the OC. And then on Raw, he comes up again on the losing side, suffering the pinfall loss for his team again to AJ Styles, and then gets beaten up after the match again. I don't understand why they've just slammed the brakes on his push so abruptly. Next up, the best match of the night, the King of the Ring final between Baron Corbin and Chad Gable, and it didn't start off looking like it was going to be the best match of the night. The crowd really weren't into it at all, but both guys absolutely worked their socks off and managed to get everybody really invested by the second half of the match. Gable was just showing excellent babyface fire here. One of the most memorable spots for me was when he had an ankle lock almost cinched in. Corbin kept trying to kick him off, but Gable would just like take the bump but hold on to the leg several times, just showing how desperate he was to get this big victory. Corbin again was just continuing his recent excellent form too, and was able to pick up the win, which I think a lot of people predicted before the tournament, but then maybe not against Chad Gable of all people in the final. Corbin looked really strong in victory here actually, escaping from not just the ankle lock, but the super grapevine edition of the ankle lock, which rarely do people escape from. He made the ropes and then caught Gable with the end of days and became the 2019 King of the Ring. I'm gonna give this a B+, right? The match was probably like verging on A- territory, but I'll explain why I'm knocking it down slightly. It's nothing to do with the performances of both guys in the ring, and I'm not even mad at the booking. I think Corbin deserves to be King of the Ring. He's been excellent over the past few weeks. It's to do with WWE's treatment of the match. Now, we all know, of course, that the match was originally scheduled for Clash of Champions. That's where the King of the Ring final was going to take place. Then it got bumped to the next night on Raw, which is fine. I thought it would be the main event. It wasn't the main event at all, and the fact that it occurred so early in the show, I think, made it feel quite unimportant, I suppose. Maybe if it had opened the show, that would have been fine, but it wasn't even the first or last match on the show. It was just in the midst. And then afterwards as well, we got Corbin heading up the ramp, and it looked like he was going to get some sort of coronation ceremony. We've seen him wear the crown and cape in the past few weeks, but it would have been nice to see him wear it as the official winner, and then maybe cut a promo. Instead, we went from Baron Corbin about to be crowned King of the Ring to backstage where the Street Profits were talking about Baron Corbin about to be crowned King of the Ring. I could believe it. Anyway, we do go backstage with the Street Profits, and they transition quickly from talking about Baron Corbin being King of the Ring to Maria Kanellis' gender reveal party. The camera widens and we see that it's not just Dawkins and Ford there, it's all the usual suspects in these backstage segments. Titus O'Neil's there, Heath Slater's there, Sarah Logan was there, which was really brief actually. The camera just caught her very slightly at the end of this segment. It was really... well, it's nice. I mean, it's nice to see that she's alive, I guess. Maria appears and reveals that it's a boy, and everyone goes, hey, everyone's congratulating Mike and everything. And then Maria goes, Mike, you know who the real father of our child is? And Mike's like, I know, it's me. And she goes, yeah, it's Ricochet. And the camera pans across to Ricochet, who, like all of us, is going, what? Ricochet's like, come on, man, she's obviously lying, and Mike has had enough, and he's like, no, I don't believe you. I want you in the ring. He wants him in the ring, in the wrestling ring, please. Dirty. So they do have a match. They both come out, and Ricochet beats him in about a minute. He squashes him, but to be fair to Ricochet, he looks really sad about doing so. You can tell that Ricochet is a babyface here. He hasn't actually impregnated Maria. She was lying, and in fact, she confirms it after the match. She comes out on the ramp and says, Mike, obviously Ricochet wasn't the father. What have I got to do to motivate you? And I thought the segment was done, but no. Maria then goes, I'll tell you who the real father is. It's this man. And out comes Rusev, which just makes no sense for reasons that I'll get into in a second. But Rusev comes out, he looks fantastic. First time we've seen him in a while. He's got a lovely mustache. He looks great. Gets in the ring. Mike says, no, you know what? I'm fine with you being the father. I don't want to fight you. If you are the father of Maria's child, then so be it. He goes to leave. Corey literally calls him a beta cuck on commentary. Everyone's laughing at him. Michael Cole goes, this guy's a loser. And I'm just like, what's the point of this? Rusev gets Mike back in the ring and beats him very, very quickly. And Mike's humiliation is complete. until the next chapter of it, I guess. I'm gonna give this segment a D-. This was an absolute mess, like stupid Jerry Springer stuff that was clearly supposed to be funny, but just wasn't, in my opinion, really. If you thought it was funny, please do let me know in the comments below and explain why, and I'll maybe learn to broaden my horizons when it comes to humor, but I just didn't find it funny. You know, we're supposed to like laugh at Mike Kanellis, but instead I just feel sorry for him. Not necessarily the character, I feel sorry for the actual man, the athlete, the professional athlete trying to entertain us on television and trying to make his way in the world of wrestling and instead being subjected to these really humiliating and stupid angles. I don't quite understand. There's also kind of logical fallacies with this. Like, if Rusev isn't the father, then why is he colluding with Maria to pretend that he is? And if he is the father, then why is Lana okay with it? Where's Lana? What happened to Lana? Is Lana okay? Can someone check on Lana, please? The only reason this doesn't get an F grade and instead does get a D- is because I guess everyone performed their hearts out. Everyone tried to salvage this. Every wrestler involved did a good job, but the writing was so bad that I just couldn't award it any higher grade. Next up, we get a really exciting matchup, Rey Mysterio versus Cesaro. Last week, of course, we had Mysterio versus Grand Metalik in a very entertaining lucha-style match, and this was a good one as well. A nice clash of styles between the small, nimble Rey and the big, powerful, strong Cesaro. But Cesaro cuts a really weird heel promo at the start on his way down the ramp. He says, "You should have listened to your son, Rey." And I'm thinking Rey did listen to his son. Rey's son told him not to retire. Rey was about to retire, and Dominic went, "Don't retire, Dad." And then Rey went, "All right then." And Cesaro's now saying, "You should have listened to your son." Am I missing something? Maybe Rey told him to be careful against Cesaro or something. Cesaro anyway then goes on to say, "And if your son does show up around here, I'm gonna kick his ass." And obviously Rey's had enough and jumps him, and the match begins. It's a really fun little match actually. Both guys are obviously excellent wrestlers. One of them is one of the greatest junior heavyweight, cruiserweight types of all time, and one's one of the most underutilized. I think we'll look back upon him as one of the more underappreciated greats of all time. So of course they have a nice little match. It's Rey Mysterio who picks up the victory. He hits Cesaro with the 619, goes up top, Cesaro catches him off the top, but Rey is able to turn it into one of those kind of flipping sunset flip, sort of Canadian Destroyer style pinning predicaments, and that's enough to get the 3 count. This gets a B grade. It would have got a little bit higher, probably a B+, but I mean, I enjoyed the action, but I didn't enjoy Cesaro's inconsistencies, not just with that stupid line, that incorrect line about Rey not listening to his son, but also the fact that in NXT UK, right, Cesaro is kind of a tweener. He showed up, he battered Ilya Dragunov and got battered by Ilya Dragunov, and they both showed respect to one another after the match, and it shows that Cesaro kind of respects people who take the fight to him. And Rey is one of the greats, so surely Cesaro should respect, but instead he comes out and goes, "I'm gonna beat your son up, Rey." It seemed overtly heelish for a man who's not been portrayed as an over-the-top heel the last time we saw him. Next up, women's tag team action coming 1 week after that excellent women's tag team match between Becky, Charlotte, Sasha and Bayley. This week, it's Sasha and Bayley taking on the women's tag team champions in non-title action, Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. It's a good match, everyone seems pretty into it, but then a few minutes in, Bayley takes out Alexa on the outside, ramming her knee into the steel steps, and trainers come out to check on Alexa. They take her to the back during the commercial break, and Nikki Cross is left on her own 2-on-1 against 2 of the biggest stars of the women's division. Even though the dynamic of the match shifts, it doesn't cheapen it. It's still really good, the crowd is still invested, everyone really wants Nikki to overcome the odds, and she shows great babyface resiliency, but ultimately it's not quite enough to overcome the 2-on-1 advantage as Sasha Banks takes her down with the Banks statement and a backstabber before that. Actually, it was the nice backstabber, little backward roll. Ooh, there you go, tap out please. That's what Sasha says when she does that move, and the heels pick up the victory. But it's not over yet. Sasha gets a steel chair to dish out further punishment to Nikki, but Becky Lynch's music hits and she comes out with a chair of her own to try and save the day. But when she gets in the ring, Bayley gets in as well, and they corner her because Bayley has as well got herself a steel chair. It's a big old chair party, isn't it? Edge and Christian would be absolutely delighted. It looks like Becky's about to suffer a beating because the Boss and Hug Connection have a 2-on-1 advantage, but instead Charlotte Flair's music hits, she comes down the ramp, Bayley charges at her, and Charlotte takes her down with a big boot to the face. In the ring, Becky realizes that Sasha's hers now, she's got her on her own. Sasha swings, drops the chair, and Becky nails her with her own chair, and it's a nice happy ending to the segment. Yay. I'm going to give this a B. It wasn't anything groundbreaking or amazing, but it was a decent match, and I did like the post-match stuff as well, and I thought the booking was really clever as well in ensuring that nobody looked particularly weak. The Boss 'n' Hug Connection managed to get a big win, which they needed, but at the same time, the women's tag team champions didn't look particularly weak in defeat because Alexa was taken out by injury and Nikki fought bravely against the odds. Also, I'm really excited to see Sasha and Becky's rematch, which was set up a little bit after this segment backstage. Sasha challenged Becky to a Hell in a Cell rematch, and then Becky said, "I accept, but only if it's literally inside, if it is a Hell in a Cell match." Now let's round up all of the 24/7 shenanigans this week. Michael Cole at one stage throws us to R-Truth and Carmella, who are exploring, Cole says, the University of Tennessee and the surrounding area. That sounds like just a superb day out for the 24/7 champ and his best mate. They are in the Women's Basketball Hall of Fame, or is it the Women's College Basketball Hall of Fame? I can't remember. It's something very American. And they are approached by none other than the mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, Glenn Jacobs. Truth is like, "Don't I know you?" And Jacobs is like, "Oh, I'm just a friendly suit. I'm just a politician." He doesn't say those lines, obviously. That would have been... That's why I'm not a writer on Monday Night Raw. Mayor of Knox County, Tennessee, Glenn Jacobs, takes Truth on a guided tour of the city, and Carmella is like suspicious, but she lets them get on with it for some reason. They end up at a football stadium for the Tennessee Volunteers, a college football team. Unless they're not a college football team, if they're just volunteers, maybe it's just what the townsfolk do. No, I'm sure it's the college football team. It's a huge stadium. They get in there, and Kane is basically like, "Here, Glenn Jacobs is like, here's a police officer that I swore in as mayor." And Truth's like, "Oh, nice to meet you." And then the police officer's like, "I'm not actually, I'm a referee." And he takes off his uniform. He's been in disguise the whole time. Truth's like, "I've got to go, bye." Turns around, runs slap bang into the football goalpost, and then Kane pins him. It was Kane all along, and becomes the 24/7 champion, and runs away chanting, "I've still got it," about himself. Which, to be fair, in a few of these little backstage like 24/7 segments, they were a little bit long and tedious, the humour. But that was a funny line. I enjoyed the "I've still got it" chant from Kane. And then later on, Truth gets his revenge by hiding on top of Kane's limo, and then when Kane gets out, he jumps down and rolls him up and wins the title back. They're about to come to blows. Well, Kane's about to beat him up, and Truth says, "Look, it's the 24/7 title. It takes up all my time, and your job is also 24/7. It takes up all your time. You've not got time to do this." And Kane's like, "I guess so." And then they're like, "We're in town. Should we just go and watch Raw?" And they're like, Yeah, let's do that. Which is a bit of a heartwarming ending, to be honest. I'm going to give it a B-, not as good as usual. I love it when Drake Maverick's involved, obviously, but yeah, it was a little bit more of the same. You know, it's starting to get a little bit samey as the weeks roll on, but it was always nice to see Kane, and he did play his part very well. So it gets a B-, not the worst thing on the show, but certainly not the best either. Next up, Lacey Evans versus Dana Brooke. This was only like a 2 or 3 minute match. Lacey Evans picked up the fairly straightforward victory, with the sharpshooter obviously sending a message to Natalya as that feud continues. This gets a C+, not a lot to go on really, not a long match, but certainly it achieved its goal of furthering the storyline. And Dana Brooke as well looked really enthusiastic. She looked really pleased, I guess, to be back on the main roster television shows. So well done to her. And finally, the main event, Seth Rollins in a non-title match against Robert Roode. It might sound like a bit of a random one, but it actually makes a lot of sense because it was Roode who got the pinfall on Seth in that tag team match at Clash of Champions. They go back and forth for about 10 minutes and it's a decent match, I suppose, but when Seth Rollins hits the stomp, Ziggler's in there straight away to break it up and the match gets thrown out for a DQ. Ziggler and Rollins brawl around a little bit on the canvas until the OC run out and everyone basically beats down Seth. I guess the OC are still aligned with Ziggler and Roode, which is fine by me. Makes sense, I guess. Styles hits Seth with the Clash, Ziggler hits him with a super kick. It looks like all hope is lost for the Universal Champion, but then Kane's music hits, and here he comes in his full gear down to the ring, just dropping fools with uppercuts, choke slams. It looks like a big, happy nostalgia ending to the show, but that's what we got last week, and would they do that twice in a row? The answer is no. Instead, with Kane in the ring, standing triumphantly, he lifts his hands to do his taunt, he goes to throw them down and set the corner post alight, and instead the lights go down, and the Fiend comes out. Wyatt takes out Kane with the mandible claw as the weird music plays, and Kane's like, "Oh God, get off!" And then, obviously, Wyatt scuttles over the ring to where Rollins is lying exhausted in one of the corners, having been beaten down, and just laughs in his face. And it really adds quite a bit of intensity to that match coming up. I did like this closing segment, and I'm relieved, I guess, that we didn't have Kane just single-handedly taking out about 6 members of the current roster. Let's get to B. Yeah, really looking forward to this Fiend versus Rollins feud. I really hope that the Fiend wins in the end and gets a nice run with the title. You might say, like, why would the Fiend want gold? But I mean, I liked it when Undertaker was going after the belt, and he's an undead zombie. And I think that as long as when Wyatt wins the belt, the fact that he's got more power in the company is reflected in maybe the look of the backstage area, little things like that. Kind of like when Mil Muertes won the Lucha Underground Championship. I like it. I think that I'd enjoy seeing Wyatt win that belt, and I hope he does. I think he deserves it. But yes, this gets to be a decent ending to a decent show. Overall, I'm going to give the show a B-. I do think it was slightly worse than most of the recent Raws we've seen, which have been more around the sort of B+ area, but at the same time, it wasn't anything dreadful. It was dragged down a lot by that baby shower stuff, which was awfully written, and a couple of average matches here or there, but there were some good matches and good segments too, such as the King of the Ring final, Rey versus Cesaro. The women's tag team match was a good bit of storytelling and booking as well, actually, and also, of course, that closing segment with The Fiend. So B- is the grade, but what did you think? Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.